Hi and welcome back to my 4th development log for Toast Engine. This one didn't take as long to complete than the last one. It's only been, I think, 2 months now since the last development logs. And the things I've been improving or implementing in this version is I've done some major changes to Toaster, which is the editor. I've also made some improvements to screen space ambient occlusion that I talked about in the previous devlog. Turns out I had a lot of bugs in it and it didn't look correctly. I've fixed that now in this version and it looks a lot better. I've also implemented something called Prefabs. It's short for prefabrication, basically. I've implemented a basic particle system that I think looks really good. And last but not least, I've re-implemented the Ingame Movement. So basically I used a C# script to move the player. The player can move inside the game when playing. And that has been broken for close to half a year now, since I last worked on the physics engine. So that is now working again, which is awesome. So let's dive right into it. So let's start by going through the changes I've done to Toaster over the past couple of weeks. I think the changes I did to Toaster took around 2 to 3 weeks. I decided that after the last development log that I did, I wanted to do some more chill stuff, just small things, improvements here and there. And I've been collecting things I would like to do in the editor for quite a while, so I decided to cross some of them off my list. And let's start off by turning off the grid, because I think it looks hideous. The text. So previously, and it's still true for some cases, that the text, you can see it's smooth shading here, it goes underneath the second column here and it's hidden, so you don't really know what you're doing here, what this means. Smooth shading, you can guess it's smooth shading, but for some of them this wasn't as clear. But now most of them are clamped, so you can see optical depth points, my anisotropy, ray scale height, my scale height, and so on. They are all clamped, so you can now read them properly. It gives you a more distance between each row, but I think that's okay. It's better that you can actually read what it means. I've also made the planet not selectable by clicking in the viewport. Previously you could click you can see here where you click the starship, you select it, but the planet just deselected. If you click anywhere else, you deselect it. Previously the planet was, when you click the planet, you selected the planet. I think that the planet will take up most of the viewport, so it's kind of like by mistake you want to deselect something, you have to click the sky, so it doesn't really make sense to have the planet clickable. So I've removed that, so basically the planet is not clickable now. You have to, if you want to select it, you go through the scene hierarchy over here. It's also the case that I think that the planet in the next version is going to be removed from the entity component system and moved to its own kind of setup, since basically it's the world setup. It's also a lot of settings here, which I feel would be better to have in its own pop-up. So yeah, we can also change names of entities by clicking in the scene hierarchy panel. So I double click and I can write 4 and I can rename it back. Previously what you had to do was to select the thing you wanted to rename, go over here to the tag to the right and then click enter, and that would rename it. A lot of editors does it by double clicking in the scene hierarchy panel. So yeah, I've added that. You can also see we have a brand new title bar, not the Win32 title bar anymore. This is a custom made one, still the same functionality, but it makes the whole editor look a lot more professional, and I'm also able to modify it more specifically what I want. But we still have the same settings as we used to have before. It just looks a bit nicer and cleaner. We also have a toaster icon here up to the left. Looks really good in my opinion. Yeah, and actually the thing that took the longest in the editor work that I did was the infinite drag. So as you can see now on the screen, when I used to drag, when I clicked, I used to hit the right side if you wanted to increase something. Since the property panel is to the right here, if you clicked it and then dragged it, you would basically hit the edge of the window all the time. So you have to stop, drag, go back and drag again. So when you only have a few pixels to work with, that is really annoying. And I thought this would just be a flag that you set in IMGUI for drag float or something, and it would switch on to have infinite drag. Turned out to be a lot more than that. I had to build my own way of tracking how much the mouse moves and to keep track of it and override the IMGUI mouse movement. So a lot harder than I thought it would be, and I think I spent a good week at it, at least a couple of days, for something I thought would be an hour of work, if even that. But now you can see here, if I go to the right and click on the Z axis here to move the starship we've selected, you can see, even though I can just keep dragging. So it makes it a lot easier to move things around in the scene, which is really helpful when you try to build a scene through the editor. Previously, what I had to do to make it easy was just go in and double click and then guess what would be a good position of it, but now I can just drag and play around with it a lot. So yeah, that's great to have, great feature, and saves me a lot of time and frustration. We also have the project system. So currently you have one scene. You can't shift between scenes in the engine. There's no concept of project. So I've decided to be able to do some kind of releasable game, or to actually export a game from the engine, you need to be able to do a lot more. So the first of these steps is to set up the correct files. So but we're lacking asset manager, we're lacking scene management. You want to be able to switch between scenes. You can't do that today. So but the first step, I did this version where I added a way to create a new project. So we can call this test project, and then you choose a location. Let's go over here, call it test project, like that, and we select that folder, and then we press create, and it says test project created. And if we now go here, Explorer, test project, now we can see we have an asset folder and all the different kind of assets folder that we have in the engine right now, prepared and ready to go. So in the future, I will keep adding stuff. I have in the next version, I'm gonna add scene management. You're gonna be able to add scenes and hopefully shift between scenes. So you can do a menu. And then also I have in the, I think 2 versions or something like that, in the future I have the building an asset manager, which is gonna be something that's really needed if you want to export a game, because right now the assets are just basically packed into the editor, so your project doesn't really have an asset library. It has libraries for each different types of assets, but there's no commonality to it. There's no way to export them. So yeah, there's no real management of assets. So that's why I'm adding an asset manager in the future. But yeah, this is the first step. Next step is coming in the next version. Yeah, and the last thing I did in the editor was the camera. So previously, if I would zoom too close to Origo, the focal point would screw up. So even though I scrolled forward, I would go backwards, or even though I scrolled backward, I will keep going forwards. It didn't really work at all. Now what I can do is when I click something, the focal point in the background is changed. So now I can zoom a lot closer to things here. You can see it's a lot easier for me to go close up on things that I weren't able to do previously. So it has also changed the pan view. So even though we're far away, it's easy to pan now. This wasn't the case before. Pan was basically useless, but I fixed that up. So yeah, and the speed of the pan and the zoom is depending on the distance to the object, the focal point, and the focal point changes with the object. So yeah, that's everything I've done in the editor this release. Let's move on to screen space ambient occlusion. So let's talk about screen space ambient occlusion. I talked about that in the last video as well. Turned out I was a bit stressed in the end, and it didn't really look correct at all, as it turns out when I started looking closer into it. So if we turn this starship over here, we can go a bit closer, maybe like that. And now if we show what the SSAO pass does this time around, you can see it does make a lot more sense. You can see here in the corners that it gets darker. Not perfect, but way better than before. I also have a blur pass that I didn't have before, but you can see over here, for example, it seems to be maybe something wrong, or it's just how it works, basically, the algorithm. So it's not perfect, it's never gonna be perfect, but we can turn off and on. Let's turn off. You can see the difference here, what's happening. So that areas that are more occluded by the ambient light gets less lighting, or gets darker. I also added the debugging tool. So I just choose the middle pixel now on the screen, and I display like the kernel. So basically, when you do screen space ambient occlusion, you take a number of random rotations from your point. In the way I do it, I take it in screen space. So you can see here I can change the screen space ambient occlusion parameters as well. So here's the radius. You can see they go further out to check to see if they are hitting other geometry. So basically, if more of these vectors hit geometry, you're gonna have more occluded. And then you also have bias to tweak it a bit more. But I can do that now, so that's nice to see. And this is like one of the way I checked that I saw that I had issues. Like I needed to get this one working correctly and have them pointing in the correct direction. So yeah, it looks awesome and nice to have this kind of debugging tool as well. I hope to do the same for physics in an upcoming version, where I can get some guidance of how the hits works and everything, and bounding boxes and so on. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing. So let's talk about prefab or prefabrication, which is a way to prepare entities so that they can more easily be added to the game. You could build an entity with the correct components through the scripting code, but it's easier to just say scene.load prefab with the name of the prefab. So it's basically a template for an entity. So what we can do now in the engine, we can right click and press create prefab, and let's name it Starship. Bam! And you can see now the text is blue, indicating that this is a prefabricated entity. We can go to the content browser and we have a new folder here called Prefabs. Press it, and here we have now the Starship that we just created. So what I can do now is drag it in, and we get a new prefab, and it has the exact same entities as the other one that we created it from here. So if we go here and just move it away, you can see we have a second one now. So this will be usable from a script. So in the next version, I'm just going to add a button so we can test it out. Basically, you can add, by clicking the button, you will add another prefabricated Starship. So yeah, and you can also do changes, and then you can update the prefab. So yeah, that's the new prefabrication system. So let's talk a bit about the biggest change, or at least I feel that's the biggest change in this release. It was the fix I was most looking forward, or the feature I was most looking forward developing in this release, it has a profound impact on the visuals and on the feeling that the scene is actually alive, and that is of course the particle system. So I just wanted to start out by adding a small particle system that will be used for the engine exhaust. So basically the whole particle system is built around rocket exhaust and rendering rocket exhaust. So if we go in now to Starship 3, which is a prefab as we created in the last step, we now have 3 rocket engines, of course, and they all have a component called particles. They have a number of settings. Emit function, I have cone and box here, where cone basically triangular shape from the spawn point, and a box is more of like it's a random position within that box as the spawn point. And we have the emitting function, so we can just, if we start here by going a bit closer, maybe this a bit closer here, and we can also, like if we start by rotating here, we can see we have 3 red cubes inside of the engines, and these are actually this is a way for me to tell the user where the spawn point is for the particle system. Might make them, you can turn them off in the future, I don't know. I just wanted an easy way to display where the spawn point is, so I could easily see that it works. But yeah, if we go back to rocket boost engine 1 here, and we click emitting, we can see now that we have a rocket exhaust of some kind. And we can play around here with, you have the start color and the end color, so we can play around here a bit. You see it changes the color of the rocket exhaust. So I've tried to create something similar to what it looks like on Starship, and it's nowhere close to reality, but it looks at least somewhat believable to being a rocket exhaust. There is no, for example, now you don't see any smoke, for example, but yeah, it is what it is. Velocity, you can increase and decrease it as well, and you can see if you increase it enough, the renderer can't really keep up with spawning the particles. So they get divided up into chunks. Yeah, and then you can have burst decay, basically how they, I think at least, how much they slow down. Doesn't do much, it seems. At least we have a mask texture as well here, which basically adds a bit of a smoky thing on it. It's just for the alpha channel to help it look more realistic. We can also change the size here, so if we increase the size, we do something like this. Color blend factor is basically you can push the value between start and end. So basically if it's 1 here, it goes to the end color faster, and if we're 0, it goes to the start. It takes longer to get to the end color, so you can weigh it there. We have the light time as well. If you increase the lifetime, they stay longer in the scene, of course. We have grow rate, so they can grow with lifetime as well. It's a lot of fun thing you can do here with them. And if we turn on rocket 2 and 3 as well, you can also rotate this a bit, and you can see how it looks. It looks on the side when it comes down. But you can see, yeah, it's really fun to play around and just moving the ship around. But what we can do actually is if we go here and we turn off the rocket exhaust, 2 and 3. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. Jesus, what did I do? Minus 24. Minus 24, like that. Like this, and then we'll just increase the height a bit. You can see here now. I've added a script also that at 130 meters it will start the engine. Doesn't slow down or anything, but you can see now, yeah, engine starts up. And you can see the changes we made made the rocket boost 1 a lot longer. But yeah, so And as I said, it doesn't slow the ship down, it doesn't perform any landing maneuver. That was just a way for me to see that I could actually do this. So yeah, really happy with that. Moving on to the last one for this release. So the last thing I did this release is implement in-game movement again. I talked about that I wanted to fix movement in this release, and I did it with the editor. As you can see here, it's easier to move closer to ships and so on. But I also wanted to fix in-game movement, and that hadn't really worked for quite some time. If you go back to before I started to do development logs, I used to have somewhat of a movement. I have a movement system in game that worked, but I had to go into each entity and move them because I wanted to. I use floating origins, so while the game is running, basically the camera is still, but everything else moves. So I basically picked out each entity and moved them the opposite direction to where the camera was moving, so that it looked like the camera was moving, but it actually everything else is moving. But after some thinking, and as I've talked about before, as I learned more about graphic programming and game engine development, I came to the conclusion that I can just add a simple, I can basically add it to the camera matrix, the translation of everything. I don't do that right now. I have a separate matrix for world movement basically, but then all the objects in the world, including the planet and everything, uses that matrix, so I don't have to keep track of the entities. Just everything in the world uses this world translation matrix that I have. And yeah, so if we go in here and press play, you can see we're actually moving now. And you can also see the planet is not updating as fast as it needs to be, but yeah, I mean, it works. You can move around, you can zoom out, you can move, and it's a free flying camera, so it goes wherever you're pointing. So yeah, this is the first time in at least, I think, close to a year now that you can actually move across the planet. I need to tweak the values a bit, and if you zoom enough, you will actually get out of the atmosphere and you will start seeing the stars instead. And yeah, I think the atmosphere is a bit too thick right now. It's hard to see. It could also be the color values that I don't really, the color is just one albedo color for the whole planet. Maybe I need a bit more of a mix to make it more interesting, so that you're able to see it from the upper part of the atmosphere or space. But we're actually in that big valley called I can't remember the name right now, but there's like the Grand Canyon of Mars. There's also, that I have in the next update, I think I talk about that in the next segment a bit more, but there is a way how I interpolate the height map that will be improved to make it more steeper, the angles of this ravine canyon. But yeah, and then also improving the quality of the surface a bit with color variations will also make a lot of a difference. But then yeah, I don't, most likely I will have to tweak the the atmospheric values as well. You can see, yeah, you are moving here. Actually, we're moving here across the plane. So yeah, that's really good. Another thing I came to I found out while doing this, and this is also me, this is also because the way I do this is I basically learn as I go, is that when you move far away from the ships, for example, the physics, they don't have any physics, because the physics engine is today very tightly bind to the renderer. So when there is, and I use frustum culling on the renderer, so when the camera doesn't look on the ships, the ground below it will disappear, and basically there will be no physics, and the physics engine have some crashes due to that. So that's how I learned that. That's why physics engine have like a physics scenes where they have different data than you have in the renderer. So that's something I will have to look into. Since I'm building my own physics engine, I need to solve that. But you can also see, like, if I lean the camera, tilt the camera up, I think eventually there will be no planet. I think I removed that error maybe. But yeah, the basically now there is no planet being rendered, and that means there's no planet nor physics world either, which is really bad when you have things falling through the sky trying to hit something and do calculation on that thing they believe should be there, but all of a sudden it's not. So I've added that in the future, but that's the thing with the way I work and how I plan things, is that I'm not gonna jump straight into that. I will start doing research now. I will look into it, and then I think I have it in 0.4 or 0.5. I'm actually gonna do something about it. And meanwhile, I will do some research. When I have the time and interest of it, I will start researching like how it's actually done. So yeah, I love it to have the movement back in the game though. As I said, I plan to do it better, but yeah, it's really nice to finally be able to walk around on the planet. It does a lot for the feeling of it actually being a world. There's also no way for the camera can now go below ground as well. Need to fix that. So yeah, but I love the improvements I have this release. So let's end this devlog the same way we did the last one, where we look at what I'm gonna do in the next version. So 0.2 wasn't as much content, or I guess had a flow, so it went a lot faster than I thought it would be, especially the particle system I thought would take a lot longer. It took a week or something like that instead of a month. So I got through it a lot quicker. 0.3 has a lot more in it, a lot more content, so I think that's gonna take a little bit longer until the next devlog after this one. But yeah, so the first step here we have is follow camera. So I would like to be able to right click, you know, when you right click a starship, I would like to have a button there that tells the camera to follow the starship. It's gonna be nice when the starship is in orbit or when it comes in for landing. I believe that you can do following, and then if you touch or move something, the camera, then you basically stop the follow. But we'll see about that. But that's something I wanna add. Also UI for all starships. So I would like to have a pop-up that displays all the starships that currently in the game, so you can control them and have an overview of all the current starships, if they are coming in for landing, if they are landed, maybe what kind of cargo they have, is it a cargo or a passenger ship, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna look into that. I'm also, now that we have prefab implemented, I'm gonna add a button, just a test button, that way you can add starships easily by using the prefab system. I think in this first version I'm just gonna spawn them in the near to the camera in some random location, but moving forward I'm gonna be able to spawn them in orbit around Mars, for example, and then you can click when you want them to land and so on. I'm also gonna add money currency, so I'm not sure yet what kind of gameplay it's gonna be, but for sure money is gonna be in it one way or another. So I'm gonna add that and have a bit of a panel up together with the timer or the clock, just so you can see how much money you have. And as you can see, I'm adding more and more kind of gameplay now that I've while also improving the base functionality of the engine. So I need to actually start thinking of what the game is gonna be, so that's gonna be interesting. But I'll take it slowly. It's gonna change a lot while I do this over the next couple of releases or versions, but we'll see. Button to land starship. Yeah, if you have a starship in orbit, you can follow it with the follow camera. You can press it to land, and then it will land. I don't think right now I will have the user decide where it's gonna land. It's just gonna fire the engines retrograde and then go in for landing interface, basically. Yeah. And then I have some planet work I want to do, and this is really interesting. I have a checklist here with things I want to do. Vertical drop. I found out a few months ago, like, the way I do the calculations from the height map is correct in y-axis, but like the steepness can also be taken into account, so you can move X and Z, so that you also get like steeper angles depending on the steepness. Right now it's just the grid, just you can't really have cliffs that way, if I say so. So hopefully that will give it more of the Mars look, the valley that the camera is currently located in when we play the game. It's actually the Mariners Valleys, something like that it's called, and it has really, in areas at least, very steep cliffs, and that can't be seen in the engine currently. So I believe that this fix will improve that look. It will basically improve the look of the planet. I also want to do the base planet, so like when you start up the scene, the base planet is created with 7 subdivisions, and then during runtime I can subdivide it up to an additional 7 times. That's what I have in the budget right now for the frame time. And you've seen in the videos that when you're moving the camera, it doesn't really, you can see how the planet is being rebuilt. It's not fast enough right now. But that will be improved, of course. But I hope to do some work here to get another 2 subdivision in on the base planet, so you can have 9 plus 7. That's the hope. One of the things I will do to achieve this is to, for my math library that uses doubles, I will use simmed types. Not entirely sure what that means or like what it does, but it's a way to handle data and mathematics calculation in a more efficient way for the CPU. So you use sim types to do that. It's a lot less. It's a lot harder to read the code, but it's faster, basically. And also they have the level of detail system for the planet, so that the last 7 subdivision that is done during runtime takes into account how far away the camera is from a vertex on the planet. And this is just hard-coded right now. They can be done a lot smarter, like depending on the size of the triangle in screen space, how much screen space the triangle takes up, subdivided again right now. So instead of hard-coded, it will be smarter, and that way I think I can be more efficient with the way we build the planet in runtime. I will keep adding these things into each and every version, basically, where I do more planet work here and there. Color palette, I'm just gonna look into if I can do something about the colors to make them feel more natural to each other, like creating a color palette for the game. Planet out of the entity component system. I talked about this in the beginning of the video, where I want to lift the planet out of the entity component system and like have it as a, I know a lot of people doesn't like the word singleton, but like it's gonna be world settings basically. Since the planet is gonna have a lot of settings for, and I'm just gonna add more and more. I think its own pop-up makes a lot more sense than having it in the as an entity with components. Blue effect, I think this is the one I'm gonna start with. So the sun looks a bit boring today, a bit bland. Also I think it can do something about the engine exhaust or the particle system we have today with bloom. So yeah, it's gonna be nice to get that in. I think that's the one I'm gonna start with. During the toaster part of the video I talked about projects, and this is the next step for this. I'm gonna add scene management. You're gonna be able to serialize project, save and load. So like the settings you have in the scene, it's gonna be serializable. So when you open a project, you get the settings in. So if you deactivated the grid, when you open the project again, it will still be deactivated. Right now I have to turn off the things every time I restart. I'm also checking in how Unity handles this is just a like investigation I'm doing, content browser, how I'm gonna do it, how we're gonna add resources, and so I collect them into asset folders correctly. And then I just have a small fix improvements from this version 0.2, where the folder should be created in the project class and not in the editor layer as it is today. Shadow mapping with planets since 0.1, where I did the shadows. I never did cascading shadow mapping, so that's something I want to improve, and it's easily seen in the engine that the shadows are not perfect today, so they need improvement. Cascading shadow is part of that. Also, shadow map setting is something I'm going to add. So I hope that these three here will basically solve my shadow issues and improve the look of the engine or the scene. Currently I can have one font during runtime. That is no go. Need to fix that. So I'm gonna fix that in this release. Also now the info pop-up I created for Starship, it only works for one Starship, so I'm gonna make like a pop-up template that Starship uses and populates with the correct values depending on what Starship you're clicking on. The render target size, this one is a really interesting one. When you change the size of the viewport in Toaster, a lot of the ways that the size is handled is hard coded. So basically the UI is repositioned depending on the size of the render target. So that is something I'm gonna just look into, streamline so it works correctly. So when you click, you don't have to care about if you resize the viewport. Now I'm clicking during runtime. I have clicking today in game, works, but it goes through the way the code is executed. It goes through the editor layer, and the editor layer isn't really part of the game. It's part of the Toaster, so it should go through engine code only and not through the project Toaster, which is the editor. Because when you ship the game, you won't ship the editor with it. So I'm gonna reroute how that code is done, so it's gonna work the same, but the backend is gonna work differently. And this is also one of those steps to prepare to be able to export a game from the engine. And then lastly on the list here, I have a UI button textured. So basically, the Starship pop up, they have a red close button now, because I have no option I can't put a texture on a button. So I'm gonna do that. Hopefully it does. It's a small thing, but I think it's gonna improve the UI and how that looks a lot. So that's everything I planned for next release. As I've said, it's gonna take a lot longer, I think, or maybe not a lot longer, but longer than the development time for 0.2. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon again. Bye.